300. Rudiger with a 9-8 of diamonds doesn't have great cards, but he loves to play, which is why he calls the 300. Giovanni folds with a 10-7 and Lucy, who has the dealer button, also folds with a 4-3. I've got ace-10. These are average cards and I certainly could have left the game. It wouldn't have been a mistake to pass with ace-10 in this early position, but I decide to go along. I call the 300. Matthias has ace-4, bad cards in his position, and folds. Once again, all players have placed the same amount in the pot, and it's interesting to note here that Johnny's King-Queen of Hearts and my ace-10 both have the same odds of winning, namely 36%. A very interesting flop, 7, 8, 10. I'm the first player. I have the top pair, the highest pair, a pair of 10s, and so I start the betting with 300. It's Johnny's turn to act. Johnny has a suited king and queen of hearts. That means he currently has 4 hearts, a potential flush, as well as the chance of hitting another king or queen. So Johnny pays up and goes along with my bet. And even though Johnny doesn't have a pair, he's favoured to win the pot by 43%. After that, it's Rudiger's turn. He's also got a good hand. He has a pair of 8s and a potential straight, since any 6 or any jack would complete the straight. Rudiger therefore decides, correctly, to go along. He calls the 300. The ace from the turn now makes me the favourite by far for winning the pot. I have 2 pairs, aces and 10s, but still, I check. I'm setting a trap. I attempt to play check-raise. In addition to the 4 of hearts, Johnny now also has the possibility of a straight. Any jack would make it happen. Therefore, he bets 500. Nothing has changed for Rudiger, who still has 1 pair and the possibility of a straight with 6s or jacks. Thus, Rudiger also calls the bet. Now the action comes full circle back to me. I raise to 1,000. I have a very strong hand indeed. 2 pairs, aces and 10s, and of course now I want to earn more money, so I raise to 1,000. The action returns to Johnny. Naturally, Johnny is thinking, what sort of hand do I have? Why did I play check-raise with him? But the odds are still very good for Johnny to win the pot, namely 26%, and so he decides to go with it. He calls the 500. And Rudiger, although his percentage shows he barely stands a chance of winning the pot, decides to play on and also calls the 500. Now, the 5 of hearts from the river isn't the least bit appealing to me. The danger that Johnny or Rudiger bought the flush is much too great. I decide to check. Johnny now goes all in and bets all of his chips, 7,300. Why does he do that? It's obvious. He wants to pretend he's bluffing, to make Rudiger or me call his bluff. Rudiger's cards are much too weak. All he has is a pair of 8s, and 7,300 is way too much as well. Rudiger folds as a result. So, the onus is on me. Of course, now I have to decide whether it's worth the risk of calling 7,300. I thought about it long and hard, and decided that it wasn't worth risking so many chips. Therefore, I decided to quit. That was painful, but I still had to lose the hand, and I folded. And lucky Johnny won a great pot, 12,200 in total. In game number 4, I'm in the best position, on the dealer button. Matthias and Johnny have the blinds. Rudiger has bad cards with a queen and a 4, and folds. Giovanni has a suited ace-jack of diamonds, a very strong hand, and he raises to 350. Lucy's hand, 7-5, is too weak, so she folds. It's my turn to act. I have the best position, as well as a pair of 8s, a good hand, and I call Giovanni's bet of 350. It's now the small blind's turn to act. Matthias has a good hand with the 10 and 9 of clubs, especially against multiple opponents, and he decides to go along. He calls the 350. The big blind, in this case Johnny, has King 7, which isn't good enough, and so he makes the right decision, and folds. Next, it's Matthias's turn to act after the flop. He has a pair of 9s, and decides to play aggressively. He bets 500. After that, Giovanni is up. His ace and jack of diamonds remains a good hand. He doesn't yet have a pair, but he does have the possibility of a flush, and so he pays the 500 and he calls. It's now my turn to act. By my percentage odds, you can tell that I hardly stand a chance of winning the pot, but I make the mistake of taking the risk anyway, and I match the 500. With the turn, a 6 of spades, Matthias now has the possibility of a straight. In addition to his pair of nines, any 8 would also give him a straight, so he decides to place another bet, again 500. Then it's Giovanni's turn to act. Giovanni's hand has not improved yet, but he decides to risk it and raises to 1,000. It's my turn to act. And now, Matthias makes a huge mistake. As I'm thinking about calling, since any 5 or any 10 would give me a straight, Matthias folds his cards, even though it's not his turn. And here you can see in the percentage odds that something crucial has changed. Thanks to Matthias's mistake and his withdrawal from the game, my winning odds go up from 12% to 64%, a major difference. And suddenly, I'm the favorite to win the pot. I decide to go with it and call Giovanni's 1,000. After the river, a jack of hearts, Giovanni has the highest pair and immediately bets 2,000. Now it's up to me to call this bet of 2,000, but all I have is a pair of 8s, and there are a lot of card combinations that would be better. Therefore I fold, and Giovanni wins the entire pot without a showdown. In the 5th game, Matthias has our dealer button. Johnny has the small blind, and Rudiger has the big blind. Giovanni is the first to act, and his ace 10 of spades is a good hand, so he decides to call 100. Lucy has ace 9 of clubs. Clearly that's less than Giovanni has, but she decides to call 100. For my part, my 4-3 is not a good hand, so I fold. The same goes for Matthias, who has Jack 2, one of the worst starting hands, and although Matthias has the dealer button and is in the best position, these cards should not be played, and so he decides to fold. Johnny also has a bad hand with his 10-6 of clubs, and as small blind he's sitting in the least favourable position to boot. Therefore, Johnny's decision not to pay the extra 50 but to fold instead is correct. Rudiger has King-Jack, a good combination. He's already bet 100, which was the big blind, and with his check, everyone has now placed the same bets, and we come to the flop. After the flop, Rudiger begins the action. He has King-Jack, which means he has no pair, and King-High. It's a clear case. He is the first to check. Giovanni, on the other hand, has the highest pair. He struck a pair of aces, and his percentage also indicates that he is the odds-on favourite, so he starts off by betting 300. Meanwhile, Lucy has a small problem. She also has a pair of aces, but of course she doesn't know that Giovanni has a pair of aces too. She has a 9 as a side card. That's not a very high card, and so she plays cautiously, merely calling the bet. Rudiger calls, which is a huge mistake, because he barely stands a chance of winning at this point. We see that his odds are a mere 3% because he can't beat the ace, and that means he either needs 2 kings, 2 jacks, or a king and a jack, and obviously the chances of that are rather slim. But he calls anyway. The turn yields the 8 of diamonds, which has no bearing whatsoever on the game. Rudiger still has king-high and no pair, so what does he do? He checks. Nothing has changed for Giovanni either. He still has the highest pair, and he increases the pressure by betting 500. Lucy still has the same problem as before. She also has a pair of aces, but the 9 is not high enough, and we can tell this by simply looking at the odds. There are only 3 cards that could lead Lucy to victory. She would have to get one of the remaining 3 9s from the river. That's why she hesitates a little at first, but then decides to go along after all. She calls the 500 and the action comes back around to Rudiger. He recognizes that he probably doesn't stand much of a chance of winning anymore and correctly decides to get out. He folds. The river then yields a queen of hearts, which changes nothing in the game. Giovanni ponders this and checks, basically for Lucy, since he just as well might have placed a bet here. Lucy is of course happy about that and also checks. That brings us to the showdown, at which point both hands are compared. Giovanni has a pair of aces with a queen, a 10 and an 8. By comparison, Lucy has a pair of aces with a queen, a 9 and an 8. And we see that the 10 decides the game in Giovanni's favour. Poker time! In game number 6, Johnny is in the dealer position. Rudiger has the small blind and Giovanni has the big blind. Lucy starts the action. Queen 7 is not